welcome to the third part of this video. Now, before we start, I just want to say that I think I made a mistake trying to start with the desktop layout. I probably should have started with the mobile because considering that I'm using Tailwind CSS, which literally makes use of a mobile first approach, right? I should have gone with that. So in this video, I'm going to be doing a little bit of a revamp, and hopefully it's not going to be confusing. I'm going to try and explain everything that I'm doing. So let's see what it actually looks like on mobile. I'm just going to choose this one. Oh, by the way, this extension that I'm using is, what is it called? Mobile Simulator here. That's the one that I'm using. So yeah, let me try to focus on the mobile first. Yeah, so we have the section here, and I'm going to remove the padding here. I'm also going to remove this one. Okay, then we have the image. So either I could use flex reverse, or I could just... Okay, so let's start with... Of course, we're going to need to make sure that things are in the column, right? So we're going to use flex column reverse because we need the image to go to the top, right? So it goes there, right? If I was to just use flex column without reverse, you see, the image would be down here, right? Because as you also look at our structure, I put the image down here. So I'm going to make use of flex column reverse. This is flex direction column reverse in CSS, right? So we have that. And as you can see here that the image is actually taking the full width, right? So here at the picture, I'm going to give it, because this is the container, I'm going to make sure that it also takes the full width, right? And the image itself here, I'm going to make sure that it also takes the full width, right? Perfect. Well, if that's too much, yeah, that's exactly the way it looks here. All right. And now we have these ones, right? And they're going to need some padding on its own. So everything in there is kept inside this div, right? Remember? So I'm going to give it maybe a padding of 6 first, all around. Okay, but now we have this way too much space. So what I will do is, let's see. All right, I'm going to remove this gap. Okay, or maybe I could put it, but then just reduce maybe gap 8. That 8. How much is 8? That's 2. Yeah, this is fine, but there's also the padding, which is 24. So yeah, I might need to reduce that gap to like 5. Okay. Now we are also going to have... All right, so on mobile, it looks like we're good, but remember, I've changed everything on... So let's see on tablets how it looks. Here we go. This is how it looks. So I will probably let this also take full width, right? Of course, because I don't have the tablet on how it looks, so we're going to have to decide on by ourselves here. So tab, okay, this is this one. So width full, all right, that gives us that. Okay. I kind of don't like the way, I don't know how I can zoom. Yeah, look. This is the image that they gave us for the tablets. It's like this. Honestly, I'm starting to think that I might just remove it and keep the mobile one. Let's see. Yeah, that kind of looks okay to me. Let's see about the height. Yeah, we're just going to let it take auto. But yeah, this looks fine to me all the way to these tablets. Yeah. Okay. Now, from around 1024 pixels, this is where we start going to tablet. To the laptop, right? So here, okay, this is what we have now. So this is where we need to change things, right? So remember, we have this flex direction here, which is column reverse. But as we get to 1024 pixels, I'm going to change to flex raw. Okay, that's what we have. And I am going to give this a padding, but this padding will only be available on large desktop, which is 6. But if I give it, okay, but that also gives it padding here. So I'm going to say padding left. This is only on the desktop. Padding left is going to be 0. All right. Media query here. When width is greater than or equal to 1024 pixels. So we apply that. Yeah. And we're going to need to, okay, this picture, I am not to say the width should fit also. That becomes really small. Okay. So I'll leave it the way it is. Because I need to increase the padding on the left here. And the only way to do that is in here, but then, oops. So on desktop, padding left, I said it was around 22 if I'm not mistaken, but it seems like way too much. 63 pixels, yeah, so 22 is definitely way too much. 72, 16, yeah. Okay. Yeah, looks like we got it. So let's try to see. All right. That's what we have on mobile and tablets. Yeah. Okay. Looks good to me. So let's go to here. All right, perfect. Now, what we're going to need to do is to start validating here. So I'm going to remove, if we go to our form, I am going to remove this one for now because that needs to come in conditionally. All right, for now it's just there. And we're going to need to give this a bit of space. So I'll say padding bottom, maybe 2. It's 8 pixels. Maybe a bit too much. Actually, it's about 10. So yeah, that's fine. And text for this is going to be that blue, 700? And font weight, because it's a bit bold, I'll say medium maybe. Yeah. Let's address these active states. I'm pretty sure we have a picture here. So you can see that when we focus on the input field, the border changes, and also this button when we hover, and when we also hover the input field, the colors change. So let's quickly address that. So in here, inside the input, right? What I'm actually going to do for the input, I'm going to come in here because it's the only one that I have. So input, hover, oops, my H, okay, yeah. And also input focus. Yeah, I'm going to create a border, 1 pixel solid, and I'm going to give it blue 700 or blue 800. Yeah. Okay, so let's save and see what that looks like. Okay, and we also need to maybe change the cursor to pointer. Yeah, now it's pointing. But we still have this green line, so that is actually an outline that we can remove. We can just say none, right? So we get that same color whenever it's active. Now you can see that every time that I hover in here, we're getting this auto suggest of my email. It's great for user experience because you want your users to easily insert the email. But if for some reason you don't like that, you can come in here inside the form and you can make use of, auto complete off. But this is really not a good idea. But for some reason, if you don't like that, now it's gone, right? Okay, but for me, I'm going to leave it because I would want users to input the email easily. Okay, great. Now let's move on to Oh, then there's the button. Okay. Before I forget. So the button, when we hover, we need to change the background color to the primary color. Primary color. And then we also need to change the text color to, I think that's white. Yeah. And when we hover, we need the cursor to be pointer, just like what we did with that, but I can't seem to find a pointer. Yeah, here we go. So now, yeah, we have it. Okay, great. So the next thing that we will now want to address is the validation, right? Or maybe before we even talk about the validation is how can we actually capture this, right? Because right now, when we in here, all right, sorry about that. Okay, when we type right here, of course we have it, but it's not being saved anyway, right? So we're going to need to make use of state, right? So, but you also need to think of something, right? So we need to get hold of the email. That's number one. We need the email. Number two, we need to show an error message. And number three, we need to track the validity, right? Before we can submit that it is valid or it is not. So to me, that sounds like we need at least three states, right? That is one way of doing it, right? I'm going to show you because I want to keep it simple. So we're going to start by creating this state called email, set email. And we're going to say use state, right? And it's just going to start as empty, right? So this is our state email, and this is how we update the email state, right? So and right now it's empty. We don't have it. So we need to pass it down to the form. Now, this is very important because I want to keep all the logic in one place. This is called like a single source of truth, where I only expose the state and the handlers. So I'm going to show you what I mean by that. You always want to avoid dispatching this, the setters. You want to keep them in one place. Okay, I think it's much easier to show you than to try and explain. So here, I'm going to send the email, right? So we have the email that's been sent, and in here, I'm just going to destructure instead of using, props. So what I'll do here is to just destructure the value directly, and I'm going to attach it. Because remember, each input field needs to have a value, right? So I'm going to say it's going to use that same email that we sent. And another thing that we're going to do for the sake of accessibility is to attach the label to our field. So if you can use this HTML4 and you pass email, but then you would need to identify it. So you can use the ID, right? And we can use the same name, so which is email, right? Perfect. That's the ID for this. So what that actually does is that if I interact with this, if I hover here on the label, then our email gets focused immediately, right? Like that. If I click on it. Okay, perfect. Now, let's see what happens because we've attached this value to the email state that we have in here. Does that make any sense? What does it do? Uh-oh. If I'm typing here, you can see there's nothing happening in here. So what is really happening? So if we open our developer tools here, you're going to see we have an error that says a component is changing an uncontrolled input to be controlled. This is likely caused by the value changing from undefined to a defined value, which should not happen. Decide between using a controlled or uncontrolled input element, right? So there is the case of controlled and uncontrolled. And right now what we do, we are not capturing the value, right? We've only just attached it to a state. So in order to get rid of this error, we actually need to use an event handler. So instead of sending this set email down here and then we pass it, I don't like doing that because I like to keep things in one place. So it's much better to send a handler, right? So I'm going to say handler change here. Handler change equals, it's going to take an event parameter, and then in here, this is where I actually get to update email. I only know that email is being updated in one place, right? You think of it like if you're working on a larger project and you have the state that needs to be updated, you always want to update it in one place instead of sending it to different places or send it as props. because you're prone to have errors. So instead, I'll send the handler, and I know what the handler does. So in here, it's going to say e.target dot value, right? So here I'll send, I'm going to pass down as props, so handle change equals handle change. And in here, I'm going to destructure it and come in here and says, and use the on change, right? This is going to allow us to make use, to capture whatever that we are typing in the input field, right? Now let's save and come back here. And oh, now something is happening, right? We can now see what we're typing. And the good thing is if you're using the components here, extension here, if you go on form, you can see this is exactly what I'm typing. You can see it, right? Yep, it's right here. You can see what I'm typing. Great. Okay, now that we have that, what do we need to do next? What we actually need to do next is to ensure that we validate before we can submit the form. Because right now, if I submit, if I click submit, oh, nothing is happening. Why is that? Okay, that is because inside our form, we are using the type button, but this should be submit, type submit. Okay, does that change anything? And if we click it, oh, now the form just gets to refresh. But that's not really what we want. So we need to avoid this, the native behavior that if you click the submit form, it sort of like gets submitted to a server and then it refreshes the page. But we want to prevent that from happening. So the way we can do that is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to just copy this and change the name to maybe handle submit. And instead of setting anything, I'm going to say e.prevent default, right? So this is a method. You can see here the prevent method of the event interface tell the user agent that if the event does not get explicitly handled, its default action should not be taken as it normally would, right? So instead of refreshing the page, now it's not going to do that. Oh, did I save this? Okay, I need to attach this. For now, we've just created it, so we need to pass it down. So we're going to come in here and say, I'm going to copy this and duplicate it. And, well, I am lazy to type, aren't I? Okay. Right, so handle submit, and we can destructure it here. And then right on the form tag here, we can use the on submit, and we pass in that handle submit, right? I'm going to move this to the beginning. Oh boy. Okay, perfect. All right, let's see if that's actually working. Yes, now when I click here, of course, I know you can't see, but I'm actually clicking and nothing. It's not being submitted. So that is exactly what we want. Okay, at least that's the first step. But now, if I'm trying to submit and it's empty, this is where we need to show that error message, right? This one, valid email required or can't be blank, right? And I'm going to talk a little bit about these error messages. It's always a good idea to use explicit error messages that are relevant to the specific situation instead of using generic error messages, right? We need to tell the user what is really going on so that they can understand. So here, I'm going to create another state, which is called error message, right? Error message, set error message. And we're gonna use state. Okay. So when we click here, we want to check if the email is not valid. So I said is not valid. Remember, that's what we say, the negation, right? Or if our email is, we use the dot trim, is empty, right? We need to show an error. So we can update set error message, and we can say can't, or maybe I don't want it to be too long. Email can't be blank. All right, and what else? Here we can also show that. Okay, maybe we can return. We can return immediately. Then we get outside of this block if block, right? By using the early escape return method here. All right, so that's what we have. I'm gonna for the time being, I'm also going to alert this email, maybe form invalid. And to just show you that this is actually working, the form is not being submitted, I'm going to have an alert here that says form submitted for the time being here, right? So here we're checking to see if our email is not valid, right? Or if the email is empty. This is what we're going to show, right? So we're checking for any false values, null, or any invalid values here. And here we're checking if it's empty or it has empty spaces. All right. So now if I try to submit, we get that form invalid, right? But what we want is to actually show an error message here, right? So what we can do, we could make use of the error message to say, if there's an error message in here, we show that, or we could create another state code is valid. For the time being, I'm going to try and make use of this error message here. Error message. And then we could, so we need to show this one, right? That's the span here. So if error message, if there is an error message, then we need to show the span. And we can now show the error message itself. Ooh. Right? So what this actually does is, okay, there is an error message, right? Which means it's not empty, right? Or it's not invalid. So because what that means is if we have an error message in this state, then we need to show it. If we don't do anything. That's what this AND operator basically does. If the left side condition is satisfied, then show the right side. All right. So you can see that it's a email can be blank because we tried to submit. So let's refresh that. Right. So, yep. Email can be blank because we still have it right here. Okay. All right. Let's try that one more time. Let's try to submit. And we have that. So you can see that our error message is right here. Now, what if whenever I start, the user realizes, oh, my email is empty, so I need to start inserting some information here? Well, what we could do, wouldn't it be nice that we remove this error message right here, right? Oh, actually, before I address that, there's actually the border changes. Did you see that? Yeah, I almost missed that. Okay. All right. So I could come in here inside the input. Yeah, before we can address removing the error messages. All right. So we have the border. I'm going to remove this border because I need to conditionally apply it. So if we have an error message, right, we're going to do something. Otherwise, we're going to do. So if we have an error message, this is where we show the error. So for the here, this is the latter, right? Border. So we're going to show this one because we don't have an error message. But if we do the border, we're going to change its color to primary color, right? Okay. Yeah, now our border is. Okay, so you can see that now our border is red and we have the message here. Another thing is the background color. So background color, I'm going to try and use red here, but I'll give it an opacity of maybe like 20. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, something like that. Or maybe 10. That might be. Yeah, I guess that works. Okay, but what if when we start interacting with it, we want to get rid of the error message? So what we could do, it means we are now inside the handle change, right? So we could just set error message back to normal, back to empty here. We're just resetting it. Right. All right. Let me just remove this alert here. So see, it's gone. And now when I start typing, it's there. But now look, this email is not completely valid because if I do this, it's actually saying form submitted. But yeah, we need to actually check that the email is valid. And this is where we make use of this. This website is regexx. regexr.com. So there's you can generate your email regex, right? So I'm going to use that. I think I do have one here that I'm going to just copy that here and make use of that. So yeah, so we're going to use this email regex. So instead of proceeding here, before we proceed, we're going to have another if statement, which basically checks if email regex dot test. If it does not pass, right, we're going to pass the email, right? If it doesn't, so what are we going to do? We're going to set our error message. A valid email is required. Yep. If that's the case, right? So let's try and see if that's working at all. Right, here we go. Yep. A valid email is required. So we now have these dynamic error messages being shown to the user instead of using some generic one type of error message, right? We can change and use one that tailors the situation at hand. If it's empty, we show that, hey, your input field is empty. If the email is invalid, we show that a valid email is required to try and help the user, because user experience is very important. It's not just about functionality, but it's about helping the users. Okay, now that's out of the way. So what are we actually doing? So let's try and test our email. So maybe I'll just say at example.com. Now you say form submitted, right? But in our case, instead of form submitted, what we want to do is to show